Welcome back, guys. So I decided to pull the 240 in today and finally get some work done on that thing, and I figured might as well pull the camera out, film another video. Now it has been a while since my last video, so before I get started on the 240, I'm actually going to walk you guys around the shop and show you some of the changes I've made, because there has been quite a few of them. So first things first, as you can see, I'm getting up some insulation in the shop. So I plan on insulating the shop and walling it all in with some OSB plywood. The plan is to eventually get all the way to the ceiling and do the ceiling itself. Now, I'm only able to do this in small sections in between jobs and stuff. I'm actually getting to the point where I have to do the back wall. And as you can see, I'm gonna have to take down all this shelving. So, you know, that's gonna end up shutting me down for quite a while, but it is turning out pretty good. You can see this kind of finished section that I have over here. So my plan is to do just the lower portion all the way around and then eventually work my way up. Now, moving over here, I actually have done quite a few upgrades to the fabrication area. I'm getting a lot better at TIG welding, and I'm starting to do a lot more fabrication stuff. So if you guys want to see me build some really cool stuff in the future, I actually have some other tools I need to set up. Let me show you that real quick. So we have got a tube bender that I got for a really good deal. I'm going to be upgrading this to a hydraulic system, so I don't have to use a bunch of leverage basically to bend pipes, but pretty soon I'm gonna be able to bend tube. I'm gonna get a tube notcher, and we're gonna be making some really cool stuff in the future, so stay tuned for that. Now, the fabrication area has expanded quite a bit. You can see I still got my TIG and MIG. I got an extra bottle for back purging. I still need to get some fittings and stuff for that. But the big thing here is the metal tabletop. So it's a nice big piece of 3/8 inch thick steel plate. It really makes a huge difference having a nice sturdy flat surface to weld on. I can't express that enough. So that was a really good upgrade for sure. Now, as you can see, this is my old toolbox, and it's kind of been retired to the fabrication area, so it's gonna end up holding a lot of my fabrication tools. You can see I've got the angle grinders, cutoff wheels, stuff like that, filler rod, you know. I still need to go through this and organize it a little bit more, but you get the idea. This box is now the fabrication box. And so that begs the question, what am I using for my toolbox? Well, I finally got a decent, larger toolbox. Now, I know what some of you guys might be thinking. Yeah, it's a Harbor Freight special, US General toolbox. You know, it's not Matco, it's not Snap-on. And, you know, I think for what it is, it's a pretty nice box. Obviously, I could have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on a toolbox, even tens of thousands of dollars. But for under $1,000 and for having a bigger box, this is a huge upgrade for me. You know, I'm actually super stoked on this. And actually, the Harbor Freight boxes aren't that bad. I've been working out of this cart for many, many years. I think I've had this one for like 6 or 7 years, and the drawers are still really solid, you know? And that's usually the first thing to go bad on a toolbox is the drawers. If it's a cheap one, the drawers are gonna start falling out and stuff, basically. But that one's still holding together. You know, it's a little beat up, but I think it'll serve its purpose really well as a fabrication box. For my main box, this thing is sweet. It's just, you know, first and foremost, it's a lot bigger. So I got a lot more room for my tools. Things are less cluttered. I actually have a lot of extra space now, so I can kind of start investing in more tools. Like, could definitely fit some more wrenches in here, that's for sure. So yeah, super hyped on this. Really big upgrade. Really needed that for a very long time. That was way overdue. So another cool upgrade, I got a shop press. I needed this thing really badly. It's great for bearings and all kinds of different uses, honestly. I got this for a killer deal from a friend of mine that was closing down shop. Unfortunately, the bottle jack that came with it did not work, but it actually gave me a chance to upgrade to an air-driven jack, which is really sweet because all I have to do to press stuff is basically press this button down here, and it has way more travel, and honestly, it makes pressing stuff a breeze. Super easy, super convenient. Another big change in the shop, we got some tire machines. So I got really lucky and came into these machines. Now, they did need a lot of work to get running properly. I spent a lot of money and spent a lot of time tuning these things up, basically. I still have a lot of testing to do, but you can see like There's a new head on it. I managed to replace the inserts on the jaws, which these were super hard to find. You know, adjusted the belts. I still need to do a little bit of testing to get everything right. But I got, you know, the weights. I managed to source the cones and got one of these cones as well. But we finally have some tire machines in the shop, so I'm super hyped on that. I can finally do my own tires and do tires for customers and stuff, which is pretty sweet, pretty sweet. What else do we have going on here? So I've sort of changed the shelving around a little bit. Because I'm doing the installation at the moment, things are a little bit cluttered in here. It's, you know, not as organized as I usually like it to be. You can see we've got a bunch of wood and stuff. So until the installation is done, it's gonna be a little crazy, but for the meantime, things are doing pretty good. I moved the shelving around so that I can store a lot of my shop equipment underneath here and roll it in and out as I need it. It's out of the way. And I thought this was a pretty cool idea. Like, keep it out of the way, keep it under the shelving. I had just enough room for these small bins. So I'm pretty stoked on that, I've made some changes to the air compressor. I plan on doing some paint work in the future. And also I just kind of want to keep the moisture out of the lines and keep my tools in good condition. So basically what I've done here is installed an aftercooler. Now, essentially this is actually just a, transmission cooler, actually. So transmission cooler, fan, water separator. This goes from the compressor into the tank, and it kind of just separates the moisture before it gets into the tank. So it's a good first stage of water separation. I still need to get a dedicated water separator, filter, dryer, but this is a good step forward. Eventually I do want to be able to paint some cars. So I'm getting that dialed in. I actually ordered some of the stuff for that, but I'm waiting a very long time for that. So, yeah, I guess that pretty much sums up the shop for the most part. Things are looking pretty good in here. It's always changing. I'm always upgrading. If you guys are interested in more like shop stuff, tool stuff, you know, upgrading the shop type content, definitely let me know in the comments, because I'm always doing this kind of stuff. And if you're interested in it, I'll film it and make some more videos. So yeah, if you're interested in the shop build, I guess I can start making some shop build videos. Let me know in the comments if that's something you guys would be interested in. Okay, moving forward, we got the 240 in the shop. And man, I haven't touched this thing in a while. I think in the last video, we actually did the fuel system. We did like the radium fuel rail injectors, ransom AN lines, cleaned up some wiring, installed some sensors, etc., etc. So my original plan was to actually build my own harness for the standalone computer, and I tried to do that. I got really close to actually getting it to work, and I learned a lot about wiring along the way. So I had Wiring Specialties build me a custom harness to my specifications. So I gave them all the info of the car, how it's set up, what sensors I'm using, what ECU I'm using, the chassis, the engine, etc., etc. And they were able to take all that information and custom build me a really sick harness. So as we can see, we got a nice box of wiring. Okay, and we got a nice grommet for the firewall pass-through as well. Pretty cool. Yeah, it just looks very professional. So this, I believe, so this is for my E-fans that I plan on installing later on. And we've actually got some interesting relays that I need to do more research on, but this should allow for more detailed tuning with the Link ECU. Moving forward to the start of the show, we got the engine harness. And man, just the way they build these harnesses is so clean. And the way everything is labeled, like S14, you can't really see it, it's not focusing, but they went through and labeled each and every connector, which makes like flex fuel perfect. This makes installing the harness super easy. So yeah, this thing is hopefully gonna be a breeze. It's gonna be worth every penny. I'm gonna go ahead and pull out the standalone so you guys can see it, and we'll take a look at that and get started on getting the wiring in this car. All right, so we went ahead and removed the old wiring harness from the car. It really doesn't look much different in here because, well, the harness was pretty much tucked up really well. So not a huge change. Pretty easy stuff though. We got everything, all the old stuff out. I do have the harness packed up for whoever needs it. If anyone out there needs a S13 SR20 to S14 KOUKI chassis harness, it's an old wiring specialties harness. I reloomed it and stuff, but it still works fine. I'm willing to let it go for a cheap price. So if someone's trying to get their swap running for cheap, go ahead and reach out to me on Instagram at 240Trevor. Honestly, I don't really plug my Instagram that often. I post there very regularly. So if you guys want to check out what I'm up to, stop by the Instagram, drop a follow. If you have any questions, hit me up. I'm always down to help out the S chassis people. So yeah, I went ahead and also decided to go ahead and bleed the coolant because I pretty much just had some distilled water in there before, and we're getting into the cold season, and the last thing I want is a freeze to come through and crack the block or something ridiculous. So getting some OEM Nissan coolant in there, so that should resolve that. When we get it fired up, we'll go ahead and bleed the coolant system out. But now it's time to go ahead and start installing the new harness. So the way I like to get started on this is I will generally find the chassis side of the harness, unplug everything that I can. It's gonna be this side. So I'll unplug these two connectors and go ahead and feed this through the firewall. At that point, basically we're gonna end up with the harness laid out over the engine bay, and it's just gonna come down to finding a good way to route all the wires so that, you know, looks good. It's tucked out of the way, still serviceable in the future, but I'm really excited to install this Wiring Specialties Pro harness because the loom and everything looks really good. So I'm stoked to route this in a way where it's really gonna level up my engine bay and make things look really sick. You know, the race harness look is pretty dope. So yeah. Let's go ahead and get this harness put in and see how this thing turns out. So I was up all night figuring out exactly how I wanted to install this harness. I tried it a few different ways, but I think I came up with a pretty good solution that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and go over this thing real quick. We've got the plug coming out horizontally. This was the best solution because pretty much the entire harness splits up right there, and I wanted to try to hide that section as much as possible. So yeah, bringing it right behind the manifold where it's not easily seen seemed like the best situation. Now, it did kind of get in the way of the ethanol content sensor, but I ended up just zip tying the sensor to it temporarily, and honestly for now it's not a bad compromise. Rest of the wiring runs through the intake manifold or underneath the intake manifold. Some of it runs behind the head, like the coil pack wiring and everything. And man, the parts of the loom that you can see do look really good. I used some zip ties with mounting points to kind of secure the crank angle sensor wiring. So that doesn't look too bad. I thought that was a neat little compromise. What else do we have going on here? Now, there were a few small issues with the harness. So they did a really good job building this harness, but when you're building an engine harness off-site, you know, I can do the best to kind of describe to them the lengths of the wires that I need, but things aren't always going to be perfect. So a couple small issues I ran into. The coolant temp sensor, you can't really see it. It's straight down there. Basically, the connector that I have on my car for my sensor is different than the connector that they provided. So not a big deal. I'm gonna get a different sensor, throw that in. I actually have the sensor here. We're gonna swap that sensor. Now the other problem, the IAT sensor, I ended up welding the bung for my IAT down here. You can see it right there. Now the wire that they provided for the IAT wasn't quite long enough to reach down there. So what I'm gonna end up doing is actually moving the IAT. Here is the IAT plug they provided, and we got just enough length here to kind of reach underneath this intercooler pipe. And honestly, this might actually be a better location than my original location. Closer to the throttle body is more ideal for a more accurate reading. So we're gonna go ahead and pull this intake pipe and weld another bung on. So, but for now, the last piece of the puzzle, the engine computer, the ECU, we ended up, oh, what are you doing in here, buddy? So the last piece of the puzzle, the ECU, I went ahead and mounted it to the side here using the supplied bracket. I tied up as much of the wiring as I could, so it's kind of tucked away. When I put the plastic paneling on, you won't be able to see any of this. I do have a little bit more wiring to do. See, these are some of the auxiliary sensors and grounds and powers, and even the CAN bus stuff that Wiring Specialties provided for me. I still need to wire in my AFR so that the Link ECU can actually get a lambda reading for fuel correction and everything else. So yeah, still a few more little things to do, but we are getting really close. Just got to go ahead and weld this bung on, and I also need to do a little bit of fuel pump wiring, but we are really close to trying to fire this thing up. That's perfect. I'm getting better at welding aluminum. Still not a pro at it, and honestly, welding these fittings on is still a little bit challenging for me, but I'm thinking I'm feeling confident about this. I think I can pull this off pretty good. Might end up being one of my better bungs that I've welded on, so let's see. Still not perfect by any means, but hey, I think I'm getting pretty good at this aluminum stuff. I threw some SEM trim black on here, and it cleaned it up really well. Honestly, I'm probably gonna end up repainting these entire pipes in SEM trim black in the future. Not right now though, we're just focused on trying to get this thing running today, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw this intercooler pipe on. We're gonna move the bung over, or the IAT sensor over to the new bung, cap off the old one, and I'm gonna have to set up the laptop and do my inputs and outputs and a few other things. But we're getting real close, so let's just keep on hammering away at this thing. All right, guys, so it's been quite some time since that last clip. And, well, I've got a little bit of explaining to do here. Basically, I didn't want to film the process of me setting up the bass tune because it was my first time doing it, and I just didn't want to film something that I'm completely new at. I really wanted to focus on the task at hand and make sure I learned a lot along the way and got it done as good as possible. So everything went great. Bass tune worked out awesome. I even started doing some street driving, and right before I was about to pick up the camera and kind of show you guys where we were at with it, I ended up losing the turbocharger. So the turbocharger just gave up on me while I was cruising. Lots of smoke out the rear and a terrible noise. It was pretty scary actually, but not a big deal. I just got to get another turbocharger. I got to get some funds together. It's quite an expensive part, and yeah, that's kind of where we're at with it. So I can fire it up, but I'd rather not. I don't want here, let me just show you. The turbo it's done. Like, she's done. You can hear it. You can hear it making contact with the housing. So basically, I want to get another Garrett turbo, and I kind of know which turbo I want. I've had my eyes set on it for quite some time, but I need to reuse the rear housing temporarily until I can afford a new manifold and V-band setup, new wastegate. It's a whole thing. So for now, I'm gonna get a super core. I'm gonna reuse the exhaust housing, and I don't wanna fire it up too much and beat up the exhaust housing potentially. So I still have to pull everything apart, see how bad it is, see if the exhaust housing is reusable, and then order up another Garrett turbo. So that's kind of where we're at with the car now. I know it's kind of a bummer way to end things, but this is just the way it goes with project cars. So yeah, but I still have plans for my next video. I'm not gonna let this small setback really halt progress. I've got some good parts on the shelf that I can install, and I think the next project I'm gonna tackle on it is gonna really motivate me to keep going on the car. So definitely subscribe, stay tuned for that, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.